Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works and Safety Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 16, 2018. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. We have a motion from Beth. We're in Public Works. Oh, so, yeah, that's you guys. It was my intention to rotate and do finance first at the first meeting and Public Works for the second meeting.
I thought so, but anyway, I make a motion.
Mayor, in regards to the consent agenda, could we pull the rifle range thing so we could have some discussion on it, if we could?
Certainly. Would you like to amend your motion, Beth?
I amend the motion to pull the rifle range so that we can have discussion. Otherwise, approve the rest of the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Now I would, this is the time for public input. If anyone would like to speak about something that's not on the agenda, but just in general terms, this is your opportunity, and please approach the microphone. See none, we'll move on. The third item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. So we have the shooting range. I'll just put that, we'll put that at the end. We have a couple presentations that we're doing, so we'll call that one 6A.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Josh.
Second. Oh.
Second by Manti. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The fourth item on the agenda is HDR Engineering, Inc. presentation of the recommendations of the Wastewater Treatment Facility Administration Space Evaluation. Hi.
Okay.
Yes, we budgeted, in 2018, we budgeted $23,000 for this evaluation for the administration building at the wastewater facility. We contracted those engineering services with HDR Engineering out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Al Erickson, the project manager with HDR on our project, is here to give you the evaluation findings and recommendations. So,
I would if I could see the icon here. I don't have my glasses on. What's that? You got it? There you go.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. I left my glasses, so.
We'll try those.
No, I'm good. I can see this part. Anyway, as Mike mentioned, I'm Al Erickson with HDR in Sioux Falls. I've done a lot of work in the past here in Watertown for the city and as well as Lake Kemp Water Board. And this particular project is at the wastewater treatment facility where we've also done projects. And it's to look at the admin building and also the maintenance and shop garage at the wastewater plant and to give recommendations on what should be done there. We did an evaluation back in 2010 and 11, and at that time that was more of the facilities looking at the treatment plant itself, and there was a recommendation that the admin building is one of those things, and this maintenance building should be looked at in more detail because of the condition of them. The project scope was to assess the space needs of the administration building, and then also to look at if a new building was to be proposed, to look at where that might be the best to be put, and then also to conduct a limited structural evaluation of the maintenance shop, which is shown at the bottom there, and the existing admin is at the top. First of all, we looked at the administration shop building, and the reason we looked at that is because if that was not going to be repaired or made whole, you know, to bring up to code now, that it could make sense to incorporate those facilities in with a proposed change at the admin or a new admin building. So that particular building was constructed in 3 separate phases. It's a concrete block construction. They re-roofed it in 2000. It's got some significant structural issues and even had the parapet wall blow over in 2017. If you look at the both photos there, you can see that that's a different color block. up at the top there. The wind just blew it over. So the mason came in, Mike had the mason come in and fix that. He noticed that there wasn't any reinforcing or grout within those concrete masonry units. And so he did put some grout in there to try to make it a little stronger, and then tuck pointed some joints to try to keep any more failure from happening quickly. The oldest part of the building, which is to the south, showed the most severe deterioration. We noticed that that wall is currently out of plumb. Whether it was built that way or has moved that into that position now, we don't know, but it's up to 1/4 foot per foot out of plumb. Number of cracks stepping up and down from the windows and doors, showing that that building is shifting around. It was not built with any control joints, so shrinkage and growth within there has got to go somewhere, so that's going into the joints and cracking. The structure's continuing to move because they fix joints routinely, and the problems reoccur. And then also, I'll get into it, but there's possibly some movement that's due to freeze-thaw that's occurring and a real wet situation on the back. The site drainage on the back, the water drains to the west, and then also it tends to pond that way from surface runoff. And so that area behind there is constantly wet, or not constantly, but most of the time it's wet. And so then when we get freeze-thaw in the wintertime, it causes some issues. And then that water also migrates through the wall, and that west wall on the inside has had mold issues that they try to combat quite often, and it just comes back. Inside the wall, or the columns, they also are out of plumb, leaning about 3/16 of an inch per foot too, so kind of indicating that the whole building might be shifted, tipping over. The lintels above the door show significant corrosion. They're metal lintels that span that opening. And then the bearing walls on the sides that are holding those lintels up, they are showing significant signs of damage too. And what we noticed when we were there is that typically those jambs that are holding up the lintels, they should be reinforced and filled, even if the walls aren't. Those at a minimum should have been, and they're not. We sounded them and they're just hollow, so there's really not a lot of strength there to hold those lintels up. Just showing some more, there's that top, you can see that the things have shifted around. That one block's trying to come out and been kind of grouted back into place. Down at the bottom, showing some of the support and some significant damage there. Our opinion is when you get into repair a building, the building code has a definition that they call substantial substructural damage, and we feel with this limited evaluation that we did that it does meet that category, and we didn't see any reason to go into a more detailed analysis because we figured it's going to go there. And then what that does is it says that anything that you do to that building, you're going to have to bring it up to current code. And in this case, the cost to do that just does not make financial sense, because it's such an old structure and it's not constructed properly. Those CMU walls without grout fill and without structural reinforcing would not meet code, so it would be a significant undertaking to do that, and we could build a new structure cheaper than you could fix that one. And the bottom thing there is that the parapet wall blew over in the wind. And if it's leaning, it's a concern that it could be an issue, and possibly a safety issue. Could it collapse? We don't know, but it's got some significant issues. So what we did recommend is that the functions of this maintenance garage be moved to another location. And there's an existing building that some of these functions will be moved to, but then as we get into it here, we're also going to be recommending that the admin building be actually replaced rather than renovated, and it would make sense then to take some of these functions and construct in accordance with that as well. Then we also recommended that they watch these, formally look at these cracks and see how bad they are and keep an eye on them, measure them, and then just to make sure that it doesn't start accelerating the failures so that it could collapse. Just kind of keep a more focused eye on it, by measuring the process. And then once those facilities get moved, that building should be taken out just because it is going to be a maintenance and safety issue in the future. Yeah.
Is the picture you just had on that, is that the inside of that building?
Yes, it is.
So that's the type of use that's in there?
That is right. It's vehicle storage, and then there's some shop work. Mike, what?
Yeah, and then on the south end, there are 3 garage stalls that we park vehicles in. Right where the person is standing, taking this picture, where they're standing, there's 2 parking stalls there. So we do have 5 garage stalls in this building that would be lost.
And what's the square footage?
Of this building?
I don't recall that. We did address that in the report, which I don't have on the full report on here, but we had it, and then we were replacing in kind in the either down at the existing shop or at the expanded or at the new admin building.
And you said this was made in 3 phases?
Yes.
Do all 3 phases have this similar type problem?
The least damaged would be the north section, which we assume is the most recent, and that's really not used for much right now. Its use, it was.
The north section is a wooden frame structure that was added on the building. It accommodated the SCADA system, the telemetry system for the sewer collection system years ago, and the collection foreman's office was in there. So it's just a little office and a bathroom and some old wooden lockers. So.
Not really used anymore. That bottom photo just happens to be one of those columns that we mentioned were out of plumb, just showing a little bit it's pretty significant corrosion at the bottom as well. The existing administration building is about 25 years old. It's outgrown its functionality as far as its use that it has now and in the foreseeable future. As I mentioned, we did that evaluation back in 2010 and 11, which we recommended that it be looked at further. It wasn't part of the scope back then, but we recommended that it be looked at. It is a stick-built, lumber frame structure, which is more typical of a residential construction rather than industrial commercial. And that was built by Lake Area Tech as a project back in '93 and '94. It does not currently meet ADA requirements, and it doesn't have sprinklers or fire suppression system as well. Then just where it happens to be sitting, it also doesn't lend itself well to being expanded or to remove some of those ADA limitations, since it is a 2-story structure, and that second story is a little difficult to get into. The scope for this particular portion, we looked at the conceptual design of a building renovation or replacement, looking at the space requirements that are proposed. We sent out a questionnaire to the city folks, and then we sat down and did a workshop, so we identified what all those uses were. And then also to evaluate and propose the most functional and feasible place for a new facility if it went that direction, as well as to identify all the materials of construction proposed, and then look at that in accordance with that shop that I talked about and bring it together and then come up with a cost estimate for a repair or replacement or expansion or replacement. Some of the issues that I mentioned, the ADA compliant, it would be very, very difficult to get it into compliance. Right now, the office adjacencies are not very efficient. They're spread out and they lack privacy. Not all the management have offices. There's no conference room right now. If they have a conference, they're just sitting kind of in the area where the assistant superintendent and pre-treatment have their areas. And what we'd be looking at is doing more of a conference room, like something down below where there would be a projector, there would be a table and all that. It's just more like be set up for training and for having actual meetings. Then there are essentially no locker room facilities, and there's only one unisex bathroom, which is also not compliant with code right now. Existing document storage is pretty stressed. They don't have enough room for all their drawings and manuals that they have on site now. And the existing telemetry room and areas is not up to current standards, and improvements are proposed. And that was actually proposed back in the 2010-11 evaluation as well, that needed to be addressed. And no real changes have been made there since then either. Vehicle storage is inadequate there as well. If you remember from the picture, there's just a single stall garage going in there, and the overhead height is limited there. One thing that may not jump right out at you as being a big issue, but it's located about 1,000 feet from the front gate. And for those of you that have been out there, the first time you went out, I bet you were kind of doing like I did, like, where am I going? Because although there's a sign that says admin building, you drive 1,000, most wastewater plants I've been to or facilities, you drive in and the admin building's pretty close. Well, this is 1,000 feet down the road. It's closer to the end of the plant than it is to the beginning. And then it's tucked behind a trickling filter, which is a big concrete structure with a dome on it. And so you don't see it till you're right there. So now when visitors come in, they could get lost. They could end up in the pre-treatment building by accident. And, that's a hazard that in itself. So more desirable location would be right up front where you can see it. And it's actually, I'll show you later here, but there is actually a nice space for that right as you pull in the front gate. So what we proposed was to construct a new facility and to make it out of a more durable construction type. Right now, most of the newer facilities out there are the split face block, and that's probably what we'd be looking at. The top photo there happens to be the Sioux Falls water treatment plant that we did, and that was constructed back in the late 80s, or late 70s, early 80s. And that building from the outside, and outside specifically, this looks like a brand new facility because it was constructed with using those types of materials. On the right-hand side is the admin building, and then the maintenance shop is attached to that one as well. It's very similar. And the bottom one happens to be Bozeman, Montana. That's one that just finished construction recently, and I think if we'd go out in that photo, you'd probably see construction vehicles yet. So, mention all those other things. Yeah, got that one covered. So the proposed office space, like I said, we went through that questionnaire, and through that we came up with all these particular uses. I'm not going to go through all these, but Mike's got the report. If anybody wants to look at that, we've got it in PDF form. He can give it to you as well. So essentially, when you add all, it would have 4 office spaces for the management, and then another 5 cubicles, 3 for staff, and then 2 for the supervisory control and data acquisition systems. And then all the rest of the things are, for document storage, for meeting rooms, for lockers, and that type of stuff. And then the mechanical room too. They actually have mechanical on the main floor rather than on rooftop for safety and also aesthetic reasons, and not having to deal with the snow up there as well. So with that is about a little over 8,000 square feet is what size of the building. And then for the vehicle storage to take care of what was already at the other shop and then what they're losing at the admin, we're looking at adding 6 stalls and then also a smaller workbench area, and that comes out to be about 4,500 square feet. So the total structure would be about 2,900 square feet. And this is one of the conceptual layouts here that we went through. Went through just one iteration with the staff after we proposed this, and everybody kind of liked the idea here. With all the garage stalls being, this happens to be true south where the truck stalls are. And in the next photo here, I'll show you where we're proposing it. For those of you that have been out there, the building the area that we're showing in yellow is the area that currently we're proposing where we put that, and the gate is just right there up and to the right from that. So as soon as you'd come in, you'd see it. It would be very, very noticeable. And that building right behind it is a new pre-treatment building that was constructed, about 2010? 11?
10, 11. So
we would be looking to do the architecture very similar to that building, so it would match well. And also which also matches the rest of the newer buildings, like the alkalinity building, which is just immediately south of that pre-treatment building. And that now shows where the existing shop building is, just immediately south of where we're proposing to put the new admin building and shop building, and then also showing how far away that existing admin building is and kind of cleverly hidden behind the trickling filter. With that, I know what everybody's thinking is now, how much is this going to cost? It's a big building, and with the construction climate right now, we're looking at probably in the $4.5 to $5 million range, depending on when it's built. And we've got a 25% contingency in there right now as well, because we are at this conceptual stage. That can be tweaked as we go, and also is tweaking how the building climate goes. Right now, it's pretty hot, and it's not as competitive as it is at other times, but we'll see in a year or two when this thing is proposed to be constructed.
Yep. And with that, I will be assessing our finances to determine if we have the funding to proceed with a project like this, with or without assistance. I do know that our wastewater rates are so low that they're below the minimum, so we wouldn't likely have opportunity for any grant money, but there would be SRF loan funds available. And we did retire one loan just recently in 2016, which frees up some debt service there. So we'll be looking at that as we go through the CIP budgeting process this year. And if we find this to be feasible in the near future, I would likely budget for design in perhaps as early as 2019 to get a firmer grip on the actual cost and see what it would run us. And then we wouldn't be budgeting any construction until such time as we knew we had the funding to proceed with the project, of course. And it might be that we'll find that the funding's just not available and we have to push it back, but we could still have a design on the shelf, which is pretty inexpensive and easy to dust that off and move forward if the finances aren't there now, when they are there. So that's kind of where we'd like to proceed, and you'll see me coming forward with this information during the budgeting process.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Al. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good one.
Anybody have any questions?
I just have one. So if I'm following the years and the, budgeting process, I just was looking at that building thinking, I'm not sure I want to go to work there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and I'm not, being overly dramatic, but in your opinions, are we still are we still safe, waiting until, and I know that new facilities also increase production, or make people more productive, but I know that money is a reality, but I guess I just wanted to know about the safety factor for you and the employees.
Well, I'd say that the operations shop, that masonry structure, the parts of the walls are broken off in the wind. It's that bad. So that structure should be demolished at some point. The sooner the better. The existing administration building, that garage stall there, the trucks are so much taller now, we can't park a pickup in that garage door, so we can't really use that for a lot of our vehicles. And so what we talked about a little bit here today is we have two workshops. The sewer collection folks have one in their building on the south end of the facility. This one, the old masonry structure, is the operator. So we would put them all in that same building and would probably lose a garage stall down there, but then we would pick up the garage stalls that we lost there and at the operation shop in this new structure with the layout we're looking at right now. So, but that one structure, it's good for cold storage, but we might even have something damaged next time. We have remortared those walls multiple times over the last 20 years, and it's just not plumb anymore. It's just rocking in the wind, kind of, I guess. So it needs to go.
So the admin building?
No, that's the operation shop, the masonry building.
Al said the admin building doesn't meet code.
Oh, there's code
Too.
issues with that also.
Yeah, 88 building.
But we're still going to use it for something else?
Well, my thought on that one is if we get this project off the ground, which we hope we do, we would continue to use that because it houses a telemetry system for the facility, and then we would move into a new structure, and then that building would become cold storage we have a lot of boxes and boxes of records over the years of all of our data. And at some point that structure might go too, just to free up the space because we're a small footprint. And one of the good things about putting this building up there, if this works, is that it's out of the way of a future additional process downstream or a new process if we have to get into phosphorus removal or something. So I think ultimately both of those two structures will get demolished in the not too distant future, but that operation shop, the masonry structure, as soon as we can afford to do so.
Okay,
Yeah, the admin itself, there's no life safety issues there that we noticed, but
Right.
the shop definitely.
yeah.
It-
Yeah, well,
it seems
and
so.
even so, that admin building, as Beth was saying, it's not like a really great place to go to work.
Well,
Even though you're not worried that it's gonna fall in.
I'm the only supervisor that has a private office, and you have to do employee issues and evaluations, and you need some
Yeah.
confidentiality, and so that's one of the big issues. And again, that was the picture of our training session is huddling around on the desk of the supervisor's computer, and I think I'm just going to guess, but I'd say the supervisors, I know pre-treatment, they do a good 30 sessions a year, so there's probably 90 or 100 training sessions a year taking place, not counting the staff meetings that I hold weekly, so we just don't have the facilities, so.
Right. Mike?
Is it possible that, if you have a funding issue, Mike, that you could do this in two phases, where you could do the replacement of the shop and then come back at a later date and do the admin attachment to it?
You could do that. It wouldn't be as cost effective because it's going to make it to do it so that we can add on to it. It's going to cost more. It will add cost to it, but it could be done.
But if you've got a safety issue, that should be a concern. And the second thing is, if you're going to wait years, you got an inflation factor that's going to take place anyway, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, it's possible,
It is possible.
and that might be something that we take a look at if it is a funding issue for you.
And I'll be working with finance and with the State Division of Technical and Financial Assistance on SRF loan and see what's out there. And like I said, I think what we really need to do is we need to move forward with the design, because that's money we'll spend next year or the following year or whenever, and tighten up the cost a little bit, and then be prepared to move forward. And maybe we'll find that we can swing it, So,
All right.
but thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is the South Dakota Department of Transportation traffic study for the intersection of Highway 81 and Kemp Avenue. I see we have Dan Martell from the DOT here. Going to show us a little movie.
I put together a traffic simulation of the intersection with and without a signal, Kemp being a two-way street. Traffic volumes are projected out 20 years. We didn't want to take the signal up and have to put it back in about 5 years. What you see here is, of course, First Avenue Southeast on the bottom and First Avenue Northeast up at the top. And you can see as traffic goes, we do see quite a bit of a queue still up at First North. A lot of that is due to the traffic coming off the side street off of Kemp and First South as they make their left turns and right turns off there. If you watch the queue come from the bottom, you'll see when they get to, when they start out on the green from First Avenue Southeast, they'll get to First North about time the signal switches. As you can see there, we had a fair-sized backup of traffic on Kemp itself on the west side with the signal. You go back 4 or 5 cars, sometimes more. And we do get a few stutters because of memory problems. This is a pretty big file I tried to make a recording of. And it is an improvement. The timings are a little fine-tuned better than they are now, so you should only have to stop once going through there, not today. It's probably sometimes 2, maybe even 3 times. We do have a little problem with the controller up at the First Avenue Northeast. Right now, it won't come into sync for us for some reason. Okay, I guess that's that one. I can show you the two-way stop one. There's another file in here. Okay. Where did the whole thing go? Oops. Gee, don't I? Okay, here's the, using the same volumes and everything else. This is with it being a stop sign. And what we do is try to use the signal to produce a gap so they can come out of Kemp. Get our first cars coming up now. And you'll see a 2, 3 car back a gap up. Sometimes you get a not a very aggressive driver who wants the whole thing clean before they come out. It does its best to simulate what's there. We actually did come out and ran existing volumes on it and tried to put these timings in there and to validate the model to make sure it was running correctly. So it gives a pretty good depiction of what's going on out there. First north, first south, basically they stay the same. You can still get that big cube first north that comes off the side street. And as you can see, Kemp doesn't back up very much at all during this time.
And this is a peak hour.
Yes, this is the PM peak when businesses and stuff are letting loose downtown. There's a few office spaces stuff down there that dump in there. It's the worst one we could find. It's basically we took the worst 15 minutes that came off of that. Now, if you guys are in favor of removing it, we would be looking at probably installing a hawk system out there to get pedestrians across, which is similar to what's being done up on 81 up north by the Christian school or whatever that is in the daycare up there. We'd have to only remove the one pole in the northwest quadrant. We'd have to remove that pole completely and take a signal head off the luminaire pole in the southeast quadrant and hang up some different heads that would, one with the 2 reds up top, one yellow at the bottom, which would go fairly quick. And the ped buttons would be existing, and they'd be able to cross both on the north side and the south side of the intersection. That way we don't leave the peds kind of high and dry.
I know it would be really small, but I didn't see a lot of pedestrian crossing during that time.
This one here, I don't have any pedestrians in this thing. at this
Oh,
time.
you
They're
didn't.
invisible.
You just took them out. Okay, they're gone
They're on, yeah.
because I was looking for them.
We'll assume they're there and they need assistance getting across. So that's why we'll put the
Yeah.
hawk signal in.
Yeah, and you probably
for
see
the
more
pedestrians.
pedestrians, I'd say, in the evening, especially when you've got downtown activities, so you do downtown concerts, things like that. I'd expect to see more at that time of day than it would be during this peak period.
Right. So in the peak period, we weren't seeing
Yeah, we didn't have any in our
Anything
counts either.
alarming.
And we did the counts in February and did a adjustment for summertime, and then we upped it. We looked at the growth from former counts we'd done over the last 20 years and upped it, and then added another 15% on that, just to be safe.
And you had done this analysis a few years ago.
Yeah, I can't remember what year it was, but it's been a ways back.
Right. And this more or less is the same conclusion,
Yes.
that it isn't going to cause a significant problem at all to
Right.
remove the signals.
Right. We may have to do some tweaking when it gets in to adjust the ones at first north, first south to produce gaps to get them
Right.
off the cap if we make sure, there might be a little fine tuning to it.
Right, so in answer to the question, if we remove the signals, are we going to create a traffic problem? The answer is no.
No, and it'd be our plan if we would actually go to flash for a while and try it with the signal running in flash before we tore it out.
Right. Don has a question?
You've studied this before, so you came into this with some assumptions. Was there any anomalies that came out of this that you weren't expecting?
No, not really. There really has been very little growth down there since it's a very developed area down there already. There's been not much more building and going on and stuff like that. That's why I added the extra 15% on there. So yeah, really nothing different. The only thing different was now it's a two-way, both Kemp and First Avenue Southeast being two ways, when back then they were both one ways.
Right, that's right. So you hadn't actually done this
No.
analysis then, because we weren't contemplating going to two-way. We were just contemplating taking the signal out.
Yes.
Are there other questions for Dan? Got any questions about the pedestrian signal? So if the Public Works Committee votes to recommend this, what will be the next step? Do you need a full council action to move
Yes.
forward?
Mayor.
So we'll take this Monday.
I did take the liberty, I look back, we did take action in February to consider the elimination of the traffic signal at the intersection of Kemp Avenue and Highway 81, and that was approved pending this report. So
No
the
need
full
to
council
take-
doesn't need any further action if we accept this report as is.
But do we want the full council? It's only Monday, so.
No, this was at the full council then, too.
Who's accepting it, though? The committee?
No,
Or the council?
this was a council motion at the February.
To move forward as long as we accept.
Correct, yep.
So the acceptance
Okay.
is
Okay, I understand where you're
what
going.
we'd be
Okay.
accepting the DOT modeling results as being supportive of the action. And we can give you that Monday night
Okay.
with a recommendation from the Public Works Committee. And then you would go forward in
Yes,
collecting quotes?
Yeah, we'd have to get a project into our system by using strictly all DOT money. We'd have to go to, put together a contract and put plans together, and then, of course, then let the project advertise it. So it does take a certain amount of time for us to go through our process.
Okay, and then would there be a reason to bring it back to us if the quotes were higher than you were expecting, or?
I would like to think we'd get pretty close to it. It should be it's going to be something that probably cost us maybe to be less than $30,000.
And you're not asking the city to contribute to that?
No,
right
in this
now?
case, no.
Yeah.
If we were to keep the signal, we would have to ask the city to help a little bit to make the
ADA modifications?
we do the ADA modifications, but you'd have to be responsible for adding the mast arm signal pole in the
right.
southwest quadrant and stuff like that. Any work there. If we had to do the ADA, if we kept the signal, we would have to tear the quadrants out. They're all not compliant for having. We'd have to put 2 buttons in each each quadrant now, and that would involve now obtaining right of way plus reconstruction of those quadrants. So we'd be looking at maybe 2-3 years before
Yeah.
we actually got it done.
And not a lot of benefit,
No.
so, questions? Mike?
If we get, a year into this or 2 years into this and it's just not working like the model says it should, then what do? Then we go to a plan B to maybe redo what was going to be our plan B in the first place?
Yeah, if it got so bad, we would have to go back and develop a project to fix it. That's like I say, this would be the kind of the goal once you guys, I think you're going to go to a 2-way pretty quick here, or?
That was our desire.
Yeah.
And then at that time, we'd just go into Flash, and would see how it operates. And within the next, 2 to 5 years, it probably wouldn't change much.
Okay.
So we'll know before even then.
When will you put it into Flash?
As soon as you guys get it to go to a 2-way, we can put it to Flash and see how it runs.
Okay,
Because we can't keep it the way it is with the 2-way traffic.
right,
So we'd have to go Flash at that time.
okay.
What's your metric for when we go into that to determine that it's operating? I know you said you had to maybe tweak the lights up above, but
we'd be measuring delay and stuff like that. We'd be checking out and measure the effectiveness of the intersection itself.
okay.
Other questions? All right, I'll look for a motion for acceptance, a recommendation of acceptance of the DOT.
I'll second.
Motion by Danforth and second by Mantee. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. It was fun to watch those little cars. Okay, the next item on the agenda is authorization for the mayor to sign a joint powers agreement with the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks regarding the shooting range project number 1619. And we also have award of the contract, which is this same project. So these are together. And Shane, I'll let you explain.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We did take bids on May 3rd. We received 6 bids. They ranged from $365,000 to $716,000. The low bid was submitted by Rounds Construction of Brookings in the amount of $364,995, which is amazingly 50% lower than the engineer's estimate of $720,000. We did reach out to that contractor, discuss the bid results, and they were concerned that they missed something, but upon conclusion of our discussion with them, they concluded that they didn't miss anything. They just simply were aggressive on their prices. So with that, they're comfortable proceeding with the project if they get awarded. That Rounds Construction is currently working on a project at the landfill. And when we did the 29th Street project last year, they were a subcontractor doing the earthwork there. So we do have some familiarity with Rounds Construction and have no indications that they wouldn't be a sound choice for award. So with that, we did put this on the consent agenda because it was within our budget and below estimate costs. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Councilman Danforth.
Shane, do you have the layout that you could bring up? Okay, go. So the plan here is then on the right that those are 2 100-yard bays, correct?
Correct. And the one bay does have a 50-yard target area for two lanes.
Do we have now, with this kind of a number, do we have any say in making a change to either add or modify one of those lanes, or either add a lane or to modify one of the lanes to get out to the 200 yards? Or is this one of those things we're going to throw holy water on and don't really have a say to?
At this point, we wouldn't propose to do that, mostly because the grant funding and all that stuff is kind of well-defined, and it would take a we'd probably have to rebid it if you wanted to try to do that. And so by law, we can't go 15%. If we awarded this contract today, our limit on adding work is 15%. And that 200-yard lane would clearly add more than 15%. So
if you went from the one that's 100 to 200, you said that would go beyond the 15.
Yes, because you'd add more baffles. The baffle structures are a substantial cost item, and each additional baffle would substantially increase the cost.
Because I'll throw my 2 cents in on this again, as I did before. I think we're missing a very, very significant part of the user group by having all of the 100-yard lanes and not the 200-yard lanes. I think you're going to take out a lot of users by not having something greater than 100 yards. Just and with this number coming in so much lower than the engineering estimate, I think we're going to be missing the boat on this as far as users. So, just
That was debated earlier when they decided to go with this design, and a decision was made by a group. So
the reasons why I was given was the cost of the berm is one of the things that was when I looked into it. But I mean, we're literally coming in half the price of what, assuming that's the number. So,
Are there other questions? And you kind of did the 6A part first. And we'll,
Well,
which is fine.
the 6A or the award you wouldn't need the joint powers agreement if you didn't make
Right,
award.
that's true.
So my recommendation is that you award the project and then take action on the joint powers agreement.
Is anyone comfortable making that motion? You have some more questions?
I just have one question of Mike. Which are you talking about, the deer hunters, elk hunters for the 200 yard? Is that, I'm talking to you.
well, anybody who shoots a rifle, typically your 100-yard is for initial sighting in.
Okay.
And then 200 yards is where you start for skill development.
See if you can,
don't,
like
and-
that guy on Will Kill. To see if you know. Okay.
I mean, the trend, if you look at rifle ranges now, is to be out at 400, 500, 600 yards or more. And really, this is being set up for pistol and initial sighting in. That's really what this is for.
Okay.
And so it's going to take a lot of your user groups out after they sight their rifle in, is what I'm saying.
Is anybody here from the council? Were they on that committee that talked about the how long the lanes were? No. Okay. What's the possibility in that location of adding a 200 and a 400 at some point?
We did position the bays in the project to allow for additional bays to be built to the east that could be longer. So we've cited the initial project such that it could be expanded in the future. But really what we were bumping our nose on is that a lot of our preliminary cost estimates way exceeded the anticipated budget. So we had to pare it back. This is what was vetted as an acceptable target for the project initially. And we did anticipate that the costs were going to be pushing $700,000. And we actually went to the extent that we actually passed the hat around between the city and the game fish and parks, wondering how we were going to cover the gaps if we fell short. So we were really concerned about overall project costs and just amazed by the numbers. But if you look at the other numbers that were presented, they were up in the range where we expected to be. So this guy happened to leave some money on the table and gave the city's going to benefit greatly from that. But if you get above him much further, we're right in where our budget concerns were going to begin. So I think we've gotten a blessed project here.
Okay, because I know that I've really wanted there to be a range, a pistol and a rifle range, and it's the time span. When would you start this if we approved everything as it sits right now?
Well, we have the award, then we have about a 2-week plus process where we get all the contracts awarded. I would suspect that the Rounds Construction would work hard on the landfill project, get that to a point where they can move their equipment down to here and begin construction down on this project. So, and it might be possible that they'll bring equipment up here as well. But anyway, it's plausible that we would begin construction first part of June.
Mayor, I got another question here. Is this something that we could go out, accept what we have on right now, and go out and get a quote on adding another lane?
By round? Are you talking
Well, whoever.
the same contractor?
You go out for bids.
Well,
But if he's already here,
It wouldn't
That-
be a quote because it wouldn't be under $50,000 worth of work. So you'd have to do a
bidding.
full-blown bid.
Right, that's what I'm
process.
saying. Yeah, I don't mean, yeah, that's
We
what I
could
mean.
do that. The Game Fish and Parks designed it. We didn't design it. So
But
we
the
would
pl-
have to take that on or convince them to
Okay,
do that part.
okay. And I don't want to be argumentative on this, but the reason why I was told there wasn't a 200-yard lane is because of funding. Now we're half the engineering proposed, or the estimate, which means why wouldn't we look at least to see what it would cost then at this time while everything is being pulled together to see what that would cost?
Well, one reason to not do that would be we have an excellent bid, and I could pretty much guarantee we would not get an identical bid for an identical project tomorrow, because all of the cards are out on the table and the low bidder is considerably lower than the next low bidder. So
I'm not saying rebid the
that
whole
would be-
thing, Mayor. I'm saying accept what you've got on paper and start another project for the adding of that other lane.
Yes, we could do that. And who
I
are
understand
you-
we might as well see what those dollars are,
Yeah.
because if we go back to the reason why it wasn't, was because of dollars. It wasn't because we didn't need it.
Okay, yes, we could do that, and if you want us to pursue that, the first step would be to ask the Game Fish and Parks if they'd be willing to pay for 75% of the additional part and design it like they did on this, or if that would be all ours. Because we didn't, I mean, we have enough budget to do that, probably.
Mayor,
Yes.
I did have a discussion with the Game Fish and Parks right after this was bid, and I did bring up the option of a 200 or 300 yard lane just to see what their thought was. And there was actually a lot more difficulties designing this than originally thought because of how flat it was. There was drainage issues, and I don't want to say that they kind of laughed it off, but they did kind of place it in my hands. They're like, you guys are more than welcome to do that, but it would essentially rest in our hands to design it and go forward with that. And I think there's a lot more complications than just saying on paper that it's going to work. And I think that's kind of where they came in, is they went through a lot with the grading on this. And I'm not saying it's impossible, because I think it can be done, but I think it would take a lot more effort.
Right. The longer the lanes are, the more severe the design challenges are. So we're doubling the long lanes, and we had significant design issues with what we have here. The pistol lanes were not a challenge, but the rifle lanes at 100 yards were very challenging to get the bottom of it to be not completely underwater, because we're in the floodplain here. So if you double that length, you're probably at least quadrupling the issues in it. The baffling is going to be significantly different than just take the cost for a 100-yard lane and double it for a 200-yard lane. It might be 4 times the cost or more. We don't know. And I know they struggled with this. We went through their struggles. Even though I came in late in the game, they were. This wasn't an easy project to design, even though maybe it looks like it on the surface. So, I mean, we can, if you want us to move forward with at least exploring doing that, I think that's realistic, that we can do some, get quotes from an engineering firm. With having the city engineer going to be a vacant position within a couple of weeks, we will definitely farm that out. And we'll get a quote from an engineering firm to design this for us and do a cost estimate and see if we want to move forward. Because I suppose it's possible that we could get it done late in the year, the same time they're finishing here, and so the same contractor might bid the second contract and give us a really favorable bid. And then we'd have to ask the Game Fish and Parks if they'd pay for 75% of the construction, which they very well may. Yeah, they might do that.
Just a conclusion on that. We did talk about the joint powers agreement as well, and that has that Pittman funds in it, and they're pretty much capped at where we're at. They capped it based on this bid, and anything above that, we did talk about if a little slip in quantities happened, that they would negotiate those. But if we wholesale add something onto this, it would not fall into that existing grant. It would initiate a whole nother discussion on grant funds.
Beth? gave Beth the floor.
So could we accept this exactly as it is so that it can move forward? And then either not as an official thing or as an official motion to explore the possibility of adding a 200 foot or yard lane at another time. I guess I don't want to hold all of this up waiting for another. Can we do it? How is it going to be designed? What, because it did take a long time for this.
My suggestion, Beth, is that we accept what we've got.
Right, and then
and see what the costs are. Now, and Maris, we certainly aren't kept abreast of the difficulties of the design stuff. We just look at what we're given as far as a site map, So we don't know those issues. I just look at it purely from a user standpoint of what. If you look at the majority of the rifle users, they're going to be disappointed with a 100-yard limit without question.
It was not an easy decision to cut those out. That was heart-wrenching, really.
Right.
And a lot of thought and consideration went into that decision.
well, that's what I was getting at because I agree with you. So
I think that, Beth, to answer your question, go back. Is we accept what we got, and let's see if we can look at what a cost would be. If it's just an engineering feat that's not going to happen, well, then I'd be honest with you, it'd been nice to know that before we ever get to this point, because maybe this isn't the right location then.
I guess. Excuse me.
But if it's not a big deal, then maybe we look and see what it does take from an engineering standpoint, because the most opportune time for us to get that is when we got a good bid and he's already mobilized.
Yeah, point well taken.
So that's where I'm
Councilman
coming
Alderson?
from.
Okay.
So, excuse me. Then my second question was, in what form? It's obviously easy to accept the bid part. Is there a need for, if I made a motion, for example, would it need to be amended in any way to talk about the exploration, or is that just a, let's do that? Let's do it. Right, an action? Okay.
Yeah.
So I make unless anybody has any more questions, I don't.
No. So you have a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that we accept the.
Okay. Motion by Manti and second by Danforth. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item 6A is the joint powers agreement.
Okay, so the Game Fish and Parks, based on the bids that we just awarded, did prepare a document that establishes the responsibilities of both the city and the Game Fish and Parks with regard to commitments, both financially and otherwise. And what I mean by otherwise is the Game Fish and Parks had dedicated or committed to putting in a toilet facility. They committed into putting in shooting benches, and they're still proposing to do that when the construction reaches those points. So this document memorializes the agreements that the city and the Game Fish and Parks have discussed at this point. And I will make a disclaimer that there is some edits to this document, very superficial. In other words, if you look at the bottom line, the mayor's name is spelled without an H, so we got little things like that we just tweaking the some typos, so to speak. I didn't get that attached to this, but I have it in the file and ready for the council meeting next. So with that said, recommend award. Bottom line is, after this all shakes out, the city will only pay about $91,000 for the entire facility. Good, really good deal.
All right, is there a motion to authorize signature of the joint powers agreement? Moved by Councilman Danforth. Second by Councilman Y. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Next item is old business. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Councilman Manti?
I know this kind of falls under safety. We had talked at one time when the, even as a one-way, but particularly when Kemp went to a two-way street, of putting compact car motorcycle parking only at the corners of intersections and possibly alleys. I know there's some yellow curb on some of the alleys, but there is a lot of difficulty right now if a large truck or a Suburban or something like that takes that first parking spot right next to the intersection. You have to pull almost all the way out into the intersection to see what's coming or going. And, I'm thinking of pedestrians, things like that. And that is a very common thing to put in a city, is to, have smaller cars and motorcycles on the corners. And I know we've discussed it in the past, and I guess I'd like it to be evaluated and see if we should move forward on that.
Okay. We can look into that. Thank you. Any other new business? Yes. Councilman Albertson?
Just for the Public Works, just a discussion or thought coming up, both Glenn and I received an email from a fellow that was on North Lake Drive that was asking about the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit and wondering if anything could be done about that. He had indicated some close calls out there, and of course we know with the part out there where we don't have a trail yet, it's very dangerous, and 40 or 45 miles an hour. So just as he sent it to us, and I thought I'd bring it up for the Public Works just for a later time.
Yes, Councilman Villenhauer and I talked about this morning. Glenn, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll give you an update from my perspective, Dan and group. I also spoke with Chief McPeak on this Monday afternoon. What I'd like to do is to convene a group, yourself, myself, the mayor, Chief McPeak, probably engineering, and Rob from the street department, just to take a look at. I've spent about an hour out there driving around Monday afternoon, observing different things, driving at different speeds as to how much difference it would make time-wise from 212 up to the water tower on Highway 20. Just had some interesting observations. Had a close call as far as somebody pulling out in front of me that if I had been going 40 miles an hour at the time and I weren't watching, I would have plowed right into this individual. So point well taken, Dan, and I would like to convene this group to assess. I know it's been looked at in the past, and it wasn't a real popular, it got to be controversial in a hurry, but now that this is a city street versus state highway, which it has been in the past, we do control it, and there definitely is a safety factor out there on that stretch of road.
Glenn, which stretch road are we talking about now?
We're talking about around the west and the northwest side of the lake. So you go
the old 139?
The old 139, right.
Okay.
To me, there's not a whole lot of difference between that stretch of highway and South Lake Drive, which is a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. And the 40 is, you're cruising out there, and there were dogs walking, people driving their lawnmowers and taking lawnmowers out on the street. There's a utility truck, a mail truck, just a lot of activity. That's a very busy, and this is the middle of Monday afternoon. It wasn't even a busy time of the day. So it is something that I think does warrant a discussion.
If I can make a comment too, Mayor, I'd gotten an email from somebody a little while ago expressing concerns about cars going so fast out around the lake. And now that we've finally gotten to spring, I've spent a lot of time out around the lake and around the golf course and such. And, whether it's spring fever or whatever it is, but there are a lot of vehicles and motorcycles and such that, I think they kind of feel like they're out there and nobody's watching, and they really let her go. There's been a lot of that out there. And I don't know if, how do you catch them? I think it may be with Lee here, and maybe we just got to spend a little bit more time around the lake or something, because there's a lot of that going on right now.
This is a unique situation where we have collector routes with really arterial roadway status with driveways every 50 to 100 feet. So it's not an ideal situation. So, yes, and I've had complaints, not just on the stretch that they got their email, but all around the lake.
Yeah, I've seen it too, and I've been out there, and there's I get it, but they get out there and they just let her rip along South Lake Drive and around the golf course, that whole area, and I just think we need to keep an eye on that and maybe just spend a little more time out there.
Agreed.
Just another comment about it. If we're also looking at expanding or finishing off our bike path, there's going to be sections of our bike path that are going to be running alongside that highway or that road out there at times. That definitely not a safe situation where you've got walkers, bikers going right alongside a highway or street at 40 miles an hour.
Hopefully safer than it is now, where they're just walking in the roadway. Any other new business? There's no need for executive session, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilman Wise, second by Councilman Bueller. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, we'll take